Okay, first a little survey. How many in here are looking for a job? Few people, all right. All right. How many in here are looking to hire people? Same people. Strange. I don't know. Okay. How many people want to give me $100 right now? Back in the back. All right. Thank you. Good. Okay. How to get hired then? So who am I? I'm Shon Burton, like the slide said. I work with a lot of the top 100 web companies to get people hired. So that's your Yahoo, Google, Twitter, Amazon, yada, 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 Tumblr, something. Been doing this type of stuff for about 5 years, which means I run a recruiting firm out of San Francisco, and we get a lot of people hired. So hopefully that qualifies me to, as far as you guys know, to give some good information here. This is sort of my experience, my 100 experience points. I think that adds up, maybe not. So I was an engineer. I was unemployed for about 10 points. Project manager, recruiter, founded some companies, just so you know what my experience is. Unemployed during after the great tech collapse in 2001, 2. So I spent about a year just watching Star Trek about 8 hours a day, and thinking about how I didn't want to get a job. So, and then eventually I spent about another year trying to get a job, and then I got a job. So this is my company. We, like I said, we work with a lot of the top tech companies. A lot of them are startups. We work with everybody from sort of the 6-person startup that's hiring that really important 7th person to the really huge companies that I mentioned before that have 10, 20, 30, 40,000 people. We see ourselves as agents that represent mainly professional engineers, but we do work with managers and some other very specific type of skill sets that are not necessarily engineers. One of the things I want to just see is, for the people that say I'm looking for a job, what kind of job? Who's looking for a job? What kind of job are you looking for, sir?
Testing support, something like that.
Testing support, like QA support type stuff, okay? In the local area?
Yes.
Okay. What about you?
Customer service, phone.
Customer service, phone stuff. Also here, you guys are both from here? Okay. Who else?
Research, geology, geographical information systems.
Oh, cool. You should talk to that fellow in the red shirt's girlfriend is also she's a planetary scientist, but geologist. Cool. Anyone else want to volunteer who they are, what they're looking for? I might not be able to help you with that. All right. Why is it hard to get a good job? Anyone want to pick that one? Why is getting a good job a difficult thing?
Requires work right now.
A lot of people unemployed, right? Especially in Arizona and a lot of places around here. So that creates like you said, a buyer's market. There's a glut of resumes. A lot of people are employed. That does make it hard to get a good job. Even if you're great for the job, it makes it hard just because of the glut of resumes. We call that the signal to noise problem. A lot of people think that when there's more people unemployed, it's the same as I'll just tell you one thing, that on the hiring side, it's the same problem. Believe it or not, if you're trying to hire somebody good for a job, you'll hear exactly the same thing. But it's still hard to find anybody good. The reason why is because when so many people are out of work, the noise level goes up for any given job, and the signal goes down. So a lot of people out of work. Any other reasons why it would be hard? I think that the process is broken. I think that the hiring process is largely broken. I think that resumes suck. They're terrible. They're a terrible one-dimensional view of a person, which is a fairly complex thing. People that know how to write resumes can get picked over people that might actually be really good for the job, for example. And then interviews suck too. We'll talk a little bit about that. I don't know if you can really read this, but this will be the kind of the theme of my talk. This is how it works, right? So the guy walks into an office and the boss says, "I've heard you're one of the best in the marketing business, but I've got your portfolio here and it looks like you've never run a major campaign. Why should I hire you to head our new initiative?" And the guy says, "If you don't mind my asking, what gave you the idea I was one of the best in the business?" And he says, "I don't remember, just word of mouth or something." "Oh, you're good, right? When can I start?" So this is sort of what I was just talking about. The process is broken because of this. The boss is sort of looking at the resume. The person actually can do the job. In this case, they've been able to demonstrate that they can do the job, which hopefully I can talk a little bit more on how you might do that. So we talked about this, right? We punish bad writers. We reward good writers. Some people have their resumes written for them, which works sometimes. There are a lot of prejudices in hiring. Not just the usual suspects being race and age, but there's actually a tremendous number of prejudices that the hiring managers themselves don't even know about. So, and we run into these all day. Sometimes out of just weird offhand comments, like, everybody from eBay is stupid. We don't want to hire anybody from eBay. Wow, this was a real example of a real thing that a real hiring manager told me not that long ago. Everyone at eBay is stupid. They don't want to hire anybody at eBay. Okay, well, eBay is one of the top 50 web companies in the world, and somehow they're just all stupid. Okay. So that guy was prejudiced against people from eBay. Maybe his experience was bad at eBay, and whatever happened to him at eBay, they were prejudiced about it. So they literally would reject resumes that came from eBay. We also see this in schools, or we see people picking out other strange patterns that you wouldn't even think of. And I'll tell you more stories about some of those. Interviews are bad because I know when I started having to interview people to hire them, there wasn't really a class that I had gone to, and most hiring managers get thrown into it and say, "Okay, great, you're a manager now, hire 5 people." Well, they don't know how to really do that, so what they tend to do is they tend to look for somebody that is like them. The problem is we're humans and we romanticize what we're like. So I'm thinking about what I was like 5 years ago, or 10 years ago. I was way smarter, way more aggressive, way better looking, and so I'm looking for that person that I think I was back then, but it's not true. It's a terrible way to hire, but it's the way that most people end up doing it. They're looking for what they think they were. They're asking questions that someone else asked them when they got hired, which were bad questions in the first place. The one key point here on this slide that I think everybody that's looking for a job should take away from this is that because people look for reasons to disqualify, especially when we're in, as you said, a buyer's market, when there's a lot of people unemployed, when there's a lot of resumes to go through, what we're doing is we're looking for a way to disqualify them. And you got to think about how much this really changed, not just because of unemployment, but because of the internet. If you go back 20, 25 years, the pool was a lot smaller, right? So a hiring manager might look and think, how can I make this guy work? How can I make this guy work to fit the job? I need to get somebody in this job. I don't have that much access to people. There is no internet. I got people submitting paper resumes at my doorstep, and that flow is pretty low. Today, that's all changed. Today we look at disqualifying, and we quickly scan resumes and CVs for reasons to disqualify somebody. This slide is actually kind of silly because it's really specific to the stuff that I do. But the only important thing on it is, I think that is getting better throughout the years, is that people are starting to realize they want to look for somebody who's interested in what they do. That's really the passion. So you're a geologist. There's an assumption, probably I'd make an assumption that you got into it because you're interested in that. So the more you can demonstrate that, if that's true, the more you can demonstrate that or fake it, the better you're going to have at getting a job, a chance you can have to get a job. But going back to that prejudice thing and the disqualification thing, people are also going to look for some indication that gives them an idea that you're going to be passionate enough about the job and interested enough about the work that you're going to come up to speed more quickly if you're always kind of thinking about it because it's something you love. So then in theory you're going to be a better employee, and I think that's true. So how to get hired comes down to how do we demonstrate passion. Just to give you a little insight into what the process is like, we look at, I'll look at anywhere from 30, maybe up to 30 resumes a day sometimes. So I see a lot of them. And what's happening in whether it's a hiring manager or a recruiter or an HR manager, what they're doing is they're running through this quick process in their head, again, trying to disqualify, right? So they're scanning the titles and they're trying to see if it's the same, if the title is the same as the job. So, industrial engineer, structural engineer, whatever. Is that title that this person has on the resume the same as the title of my job? Because you've got to remember that you're having to get through multiple gatekeepers, which probably don't know anything about what you really do. They're not specialized. They're just normal people like me who don't know anything about geology or QA or anything else. So they're just going through these pattern matching sequences when they're looking at resumes. They're looking at the frequency and the prominence of the buzzwords on your resume as compared to the buzzwords in the job description. And then they check for what they consider general badness. This tends to be, generally it's gaps in unemployment gaps, go figure. So that if you don't have a job, it's hard to get a job. Job hopping, moving around a lot. Many career changes. This is a funny one because career changes actually look bad on a resume. The truth is they can indicate a really good, versatile person. So in reality, the reason I put up that slide in the beginning is I've been an engineer, I've been a sales guy, I've been a project manager. But if I build a resume that says I've done all those things and put the order in that I've done them, my resume is going to end up on the The truth is I've actually done all those things and I've been relatively successful at pretty much all of them. But that's really hard to fit into the head of a resume screener. They like to see you tell a story about, I've always been this type of person and I grew up doing that and I have this many years of experience doing it and I've never really wavered from it, so I must be really good at it. And we do look for that. Telling a story or a theme. So I do advise people, if you've got experience in everything, or a lot of different things, you only have a certain amount of real estate on that resume, so you're going to have to narrow it down. Even though you may be able to do a lot of those things, you're going to have to narrow it down and tightly theme it because it just won't fit in the heads of a lot of these people.
Well, just a question about bring up is if they don't want to see gaps, but let's say you've done a couple different things, how do you avoid gaps? Maybe you're going to talk about that later.
Shon, will you repeat that since you're on a mic and this is being taped?
So if you've done a few different things and you might have gaps in your resume, how do you reconcile that? How do you make it look better? So I'll answer it. I don't know if I'm going to talk about it in detail, so let's talk about it now. I think that the first thing is gaps. If you look back at the last 10 or 12 years, it's been a pretty rough time in the economy, depending on where you were at. A lot of people have gaps. A lot of people kind of understand that. The best thing to do is explain your gaps. Put something in there about your gaps. So the worst thing you can possibly do is just absolutely toxic is to say, here's job one, here's job two, and there's a 2-year gap in between. No explanation of what you were doing. So all people want really is a story. So I'll say, maybe I went to a sabbatical for that 2 years. I went to Africa or whatever I did. Or I was trying to start my own business, and here's the experience I learned from that. And I'm going to put it on there as experience in my resume. You were doing something, except in my case where I was just watching Star Trek, but I was doing some, in theory I was still researching science fiction or whatever it is. So I'm going to put something on there that looks good. I'm going to explain my gaps as best I can. And if you really are changing a lot, the thing is most jobs have a lot of different aspects to them. So if I'm in a sales position, I might in fact be doing some project management. If I'm in an engineering position, I might be doing some sales. So you're thinking about how to tie them together. And resumes should be, and remember this is not I'm just working within the constraints of the Berkeley process, but resumes need to tell a story. And that story needs to be clear and aligned with the job that you're trying to get. That's the most important thing. So for me, if I went to go get a job tomorrow, first I think really hard of what job do I really want? And the answer, of course, is any job because I'm broke. Well, no, so I have to back away from that for a second and say, but what job do I really want to see myself in that I'm happy about and passionate about? And I'll pick one of those. And for me, maybe that's sales. And I'm going to go back all the way through my history and see what points I can highlight where I did have to do some selling. So even all the way back to when I was an engineer, there were times that I would get put in front of a client, tell the customer why our engineering is so good or why our technology is so good. And I'm going to retool that resume so that it shows and highlights those points of sales because I want to have a sales job or vice versa. So telling a story is very important. I'll tell you some bad stories that I've seen recently. The college kid with the six-page resume. True story. Just got out of college, listed pretty much every relevant class he took on there and talked about it. So let's talk first off, why is this terrible? I won't in fact, some of my clients, I'll give you an example, Yahoo is hiring senior program managers. That's like an incredibly senior project manager, someone that has literally 20 to 30 years experience. They limit them to a 3-page resume. So you can put 30 years of experience and all you get is 3 pages, and this kid has no professional experience and has a 6-page resume, so you can see what the problem is. The truth is, your hiring manager, your screener, your recruiter is going to look at that resume for no more than a couple minutes. That's generous. Our recruiters are trained to give a thumbs up, thumbs down, and a rating between 1 to 5 stars for suitability to the job within less than 2 minutes. And we're trained on that, no matter how long the resume is. And part of the good stuff is psychologically we expect people to put things that are more relevant and more recent up towards the top of the resume. So in a 6-page resume, 4 of those pages are getting thrown out, not even looked at, or looked at for very few seconds. So I took his resume and made it 1 page, and this is part of telling a story, but it's also part of telling an honest story. He doesn't have experience. We're not going to pretend that he does. I'll say the same thing about someone that doesn't have an education. If you don't have an education but you have a lot of experience, don't put an education section talking about every non-degree class you're taking. Don't worry about it. It's not important. That's not where the bulk of your benefit, bulk of your value is. If you don't have a big degree. So we took it down to a 6-page resume. We pared it down to what this person really wanted to do and what the skill set that they wanted to leverage, not the whole skill set that they had, but the skill set they really wanted to leverage in their dream job was, and got him a job after he'd been rejected by quite a few people on the 6-page resume. This is really a technical mumbo-jumbo one here, but this is an example of a guy that has a lot of experience, right? So this is a real person that I've worked with. I've actually gotten this person hired multiple times. But when we went to go get him hired this time, he had old stuff in his resume. And, he's got a ton of he's got 25 or maybe even 30 years of experience. One of the better programmers I've met, maybe ever. He's done some really amazing stuff. But resume screeners, and in this case, these are technical guys, were picking up on these ancient technologies that he had in his resume, and they disqualified it because of it. They just said, you know what? If this guy is still working on this stuff, then he's can't possibly be up to speed, and if he's not working on them, why is he putting them in there? You know, type of thing. And the truth was, he wasn't working on this stuff, and hadn't been for a really long time. And that goes back to my theming and making a story out of your resume. Is we all tend to do this, especially technical people are the worst at it. They tend to. There was like a little bit of a arms race between resume writers and computers and resume screeners. And we, at one point, and still today to some degree, the logic said, well, people search resumes based on keyword. I'm going to put as many keywords as I can get in my resume, therefore I'll come up more often in a search. And that does happen still today to some degree, but I would argue if you have a great big buzzword block, you want to shrink it down to just the essence of what you really do. And what you're willing to sit down with somebody in an interview and get fastballs thrown to you all day on. And the truth is, BBH was not going to sit down and talk about EMS or 65 with you to some degree. He hadn't really touched it in many years. He was a brilliant programmer, but that took attention away from his real skills. So another real example is my recruiters. We train them a lot. We train them on resumes, and we looked at 5 resumes for this very high-profile startup. And one of the resumes had a guy from DeVry, and one of the resumes had a guy from RPI. RPI is, trending up to be one of the top computer science schools. DeVry, as compared to the top 20 computer science schools, isn't on the map. And these guys had very comparable resumes outside of that. They didn't have stellar experience, but they had decent experience. One guy had the DeVry degree, one guy had the RPI degree. My recruiters failed the guy because of DeVry. So they consistently, between all the recruiters, they rated this guy very lowly, or low stars because of his degree at DeVry. This is a problem that we're seeing in education among people that are hiring. The truth is, the guy from DeVry, when put out to the client, this is where the client was actually a customer for us, was smarter than us, because the startup said what they were looking for was passion, actually. And the DeVry guy had a lot of examples of work that he had done. He didn't have a job, but he went out and did the work that he was passionate about doing, and he put it out there on display, and talked a lot about it. And he's the guy that got the job. He's also the guy that I had to retrain my recruiters to. They were glancing right over that stuff. So this guy had a lot of passion, a lot of story in his resume, saying, "I'm really into this stuff. I really do this stuff." The RPI guy didn't. The RPI guy was the classic example of someone who wasn't demonstrating, at least on the resume. They looked like someone that just kind of got a degree, great school, but didn't do anything. And so our recruiters made the mistake. A lot of people made the mistake, but I do see this changing. It's a little bit of a glimmer of hope in the industry. I do see it changing. We talked about the people from eBay being dumb. The other one that's funny is that we see patterns. We look for patterns, and it comes back down to that. It's the opposite of the prejudices, but people look for certain patterns. One of the weird ones I saw just anecdotally is Ultimate Frisbee. There was a hiring team that was looking for Ultimate Frisbee on a resume, or just now called Ultimate. They were hiring this very specific type of engineers. It was actually for a company called PowerSet, which got bought by Microsoft and became Bing. And what PowerSet saw was a pattern between schools that had Ultimate Frisbee teams and schools that were generating great computer scientists. Okay. And they would interview literally based, at least in part, on seeing that on a resume. So just to put it all together, Resume 101, tailor to the position. This is starting to get a little bit harder with LinkedIn and stuff. LinkedIn is your living record of where you worked, but I would say, for resume purposes, and I'm not saying change all your titles or anything like that, but think about tailoring your position. I'm going to have a couple different copies of my resume. the fact is I can do a few different kinds of jobs. I can do an engineering job, I can do a sales job, I can do a project management job, and I'm probably going to try and tailor it. So the sales resume is not going to be exactly the same. Again, I'm going to highlight those points. In my same experience, not going to change the titles necessarily or the companies, but I'm going to pull those bullet points out that I think are relevant to that sales job versus the engineering job. Maybe I'll play those down a little bit. The other thing is pick a title. Again, it's hard for someone. I see resumes that have, I was the painter, the structural engineer, and the company cook. That's not a good thing to have. Again, it doesn't fit in the heads of someone who's quickly scanning your resume. So if you did a bunch of things, the truth is in small companies you might wear a lot of hats. So you're going to put your title to line up with the job that you want to get. If you really did have 4 or 5 or 6 responsibilities and maybe a goofy title like engineer of general awesomeness, that guy back there, you might want to just think about tailoring that up so that it makes sense to some goofy guy like me that doesn't know what that means. And then showcasing the relevant experience. Less is definitely more. The one used to be when I grew up, it was like have a 1-page resume. Back, when I started writing my resume back in the early 90s. You don't have to have a 1-page resume, but definitely don't have more than 3, no matter how many years of experience you have. Because the fact is, whatever you did 10 or 20 years ago probably isn't that relevant. You probably don't remember how to do it. I know I don't. You ask me, let's step up to the keyboard and do, that engineering thing that you did 20 years ago. I'm not going to be able to quite do that today. So less is more. Highlight the stuff that you really want in there, and downplay the stuff that you maybe aren't so good at or don't want to do. This last one is just a segue to interviewing. Know your resume. Right? Interviewing sucks. It's not a great process. So their favorite thing to do without any other good ideas is just to go through every point in your resume and drill you about that. Tell me about that. Tell me about the specifics of it. Well, why did you do that? Why did you pick that direction? Why did you, on and on and on. And I suffered from this myself. As I was beefing up my resume and making myself look really good, I put a bunch of stuff in there. And over the last couple of years, there were enough iterations of it where I didn't, someone threw a curveball to me and said, tell me about when you implemented this altitude protocol, blah, blah, blah. I didn't even know what they were talking about. In an interview, it's in your resume.
Yeah, if you want to embarrass yourself, build yourself up 2 or 3 or 4 custom resumes, and then go into an interview and have them interview off of a resume that and you think you're on a different one.
Right. Yes.
Well, you're chewing on your shoe really fast.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's, again, those interviews are meant to disqualify people, so that's just, even though it's silly, that's an immediate disqualification. I've seen so many people fail that could have gotten a job just because of that. They didn't know their resume, and that's all that this interview wanted to talk about. Let's talk about your resume in detail. So you're absolutely, I've been there.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, right? So there are circumstances where if you're submitting a lot of jobs, you may want to be careful about that. Maybe when you go in the interview, you say, "Oh, you got a copy of your interview? Can I take a look at that?" It might be outdated. Just keeping with the same thing. Make it really tailored. One thing we see in the market today is a trend going towards very specific job applications. So job applications happen online. The job has certain requirements. So the job trend I see happening in application systems is when you put your resume in there, the system will actually ask you, well, highlight areas of your resume that specifically pertain to these qualifications or these requirements. So the idea is, again, you're tailoring it towards the job that you want. And I think I've seen some pretty modern application systems doing that even further, saying, why do you fit for these positions? How does this resume relate to these requirements, these job requirements? We do this all the time for people while we're counseling them on their resumes. Is we look at their resume, we look at the job description. Both are terrible documents because the job description is a bunch of lies about the ideal case of what they want. And the resume is, we're trying to cram all this stuff in. But we'll highlight the stuff based on relevance. So we'll look at where those things line up and we'll highlight skills in the resume versus required skills and qualifications. For those people, whatever you're doing, the big thing that's changing, and it goes back to that passion thing. Whether you're a designer or a geologist or a QA guy, support guy, it doesn't matter what you do. You need to get to differentiate yourself because the days of the old cover letter and CV are over. I guarantee you that. We throw those things out immediately. Nobody needs a cover letter anymore. What's changed is you have the internet. You can showcase. So if you're doing support, for example, you might want to write a blog about support experiences you have. Maybe it's a funny one. Maybe it's how to deal with stress and aggression in a support job. One of my first jobs was tech support, and we would go through hours of training on how to deal with the stress of being abused by people all day. How to, and keying in on certain words. So if I'm going for a support job, what changes today is differentiating yourself has to be done on the internet, and it can be put on your resume. So yeah, I've got 10 tips on how to manage stress in a high stress customer support environment. Here they are on the internet. Go look at them. It's showing expertise, right? It's demonstrable expertise in your field, in your area. It doesn't matter what it is. I mean, it's not just for programmers and photographers and designers anymore. Those were people that used to just the initial showcase people. Now it's very strong for programmers, but it doesn't matter what you do. Go out, showcase your expertise through a blog, through even answering questions on a forum or whatever it is. And that's going to differentiate you. And highlight it on your resume. Go out and say, if you're out there answering questions on QA, what makes a good QA process, put it on your resume and say, constantly answering questions on other people's. Here's a link for you to go do that. If you're a coder, this is really starting to change just as we speak. If you're a coder and don't have a GitHub account or equivalent, you don't have your code out there, you're crazy, you're irrelevant. I mean, it's like a photographer saying, I'm this great photographer. Well, can I see your work? Well, no. There's the door, right? But it's starting to happen not just with coders and photographers. Coders are the newest thing, but it happens for everybody now. It's starting to, we have a place called the internet where we can put our work, whatever that work is, it doesn't matter, whether it's your recipes or your experiences in your field. Put it up there and put it on your resume, and that's how you're going to show some passion. It's going to really differentiate you a lot more than a CV, because that's going to get thrown away. Dear sir, madam, garbage. So for the interview, interview 101, you'd be shocked at how many people get blown out of interviews. We see them every day, much to our chagrin, that they ask them, the first question the interviewer asks is, what do we do? What's the company do? If you don't have a good question for that, one of the companies we work with that's a difficult one is Yahoo. Yahoo, a lot of tech people think, Yahoo is a has-been. Yahoo is actually the number, they hold 2 spots in the top 10 worldwide web consistently. They have, I think, number 3 or 4, and then they have another site at number 7. But most people don't know what they do. Most people get caught on that question because they think they know what Yahoo does, because Yahoo's been around for a long time. They don't know. Man, that'll get them burned out of an interview so quick. The other thing you have, if you're lucky, your interviewer might have some presence on the web. Research that interview. Try and understand. Try and get some idea. Where did they go to school? Where did they come from? Where did they get hired? How long have they been at the company? Think about how you can use that information. With LinkedIn, the trend is certainly going towards the area. So if a recruiter or somebody calls you and says, okay, you're going to do an interview, who am I doing the interview with? What's his name? What's her name? So I can look them up and start to understand what that person might be like. The other big thing is, again, trying to disqualify people quickly. So don't avoid questions. If you don't know the answer to the question, just work through the problem. Just talk out loud. You'd be surprised at how many times the interviewer will give you hints. Actually, if you're doing the right stuff, if you're in there, you know about the company, you're enthusiastic about the job, that's another one they want to act like you want the job and you like the company. You'll be surprised at how many people will start giving you hints. They've kind of started to have an emotional attachment towards you a little bit. They're human beings. And if you're really struggling, instead of avoiding the question, you're going, I have no idea. Like, and the question comes up, how many gallons of milk will fit in the city borders of San Francisco? I don't know. Forget it. I don't know. I went through an 8-hour Microsoft interview, and that's all it was. Just all those stupid questions. How do they print the M on the M&Ms? How do they, Meyer Mantle hovers around, blah, 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 blah. And it pissed me off, and I was pretty much inclined to just go, I don't know, who cares? But working through it and going, okay, let me think. How many gallons do you know here in fit in San Francisco? Well, first I got to figure out how big San Francisco is. Start to talk out loud, work through the problem. That interviewer will start to give you hints. Listen for those hints. Whatever the question is, you'll do well. So as far as attitude goes, the best shot you've got is humble confidence. A lot of interviewers like to ask you, well, rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. Humble confidence. If you think it's a really strong skill, maybe you're a 7. Maybe you're a 6 or a 7. I'm pretty good at it. If you don't think it's a great skill, don't undersell yourself. We get a lot of smart guys going